So this is probably the most famous mural in all of Belfast, all of Ireland. This garden's in remembrance to a lot of the volunteers that died or were murdered during the Troubles. My family's a Republican family. When I was a kid, my dad just been sentenced to a life sentence in Long Cache, and growing up, we were always taught that everyone's equal. We were on the receiving end, you know, we were the inferior race, so to speak. That's how the British saw us anyway. When somebody was giving a speech at the funeral and he started lobbing grenades and shooting into the crowd.
And then the next thing, pandemonium, a hand grenade went off, and then another hand grenade went off, and the day it happened, honestly, it was actually one of the worst days of my life.
So that's you on the left there?
Yeah, the good looking one.
It takes an enormous amount of propaganda to tell somebody that a homeowner is the bad guy and the guy breaking into the home and murdering his family is the good guy. You know what I mean? Like, it's absurd. Where we're going now, I wouldn't have walked up and you wouldn't have walked up with your accent, you know, 30 years ago. This is known as the Peace Wall. And this is the big barriers that divide the two communities. People try to revive the language up here. This is where Kneecap's from too, which kind of makes sense now. That's where the Sands lived. That's where Bobby Sands lived.
From the history that we learn in school, the Irish history, it's nearly like we're supposed to forget about the North.
Yes, yep,
like,
yeah.
Deliberately forget about
the
North.
And I would agree with that, yeah. This road, basically, it changes names, but it's the same straight road from the city centre, from the top of Castle Street. It goes all the way up to Twinbrook, right through the whole of West Belfast. But it'll change names from Falls Road. So you got Divis Street, which is the lower Wacka Falls. Then you've got the Falls. Then you'll have the Andy Town Road, the Stewartstown Road, right up into Twinbrook. And right here, this graveyard, it was right where we're going. I think it was right up there. That's the motorway down there.
Okay.
And when the Gibraltar 3 were murdered by the SAS, their funeral was here. I think it was 88. I think it was 88. When their funeral was taking place, Michael Stone, there was the one day the British used to show up, the RUC and the Brits used to show up to all our funerals and beat the mourners, not let the coffin get out of the house. Laurie Marley was one of the most vicious ones. You know, I think it took them 3 days to get their father out of the house and get him buried. Am I going the right way here? And this one day, there was a weird, you know, there was a very small British presence. I think I remember being told there was some like muck hills over here where there was probably snipers, there was a chopper up, but everyone was wondering why it was so calm. And from the motorway, a guy called Michael Stone came up the back of when everyone's facing that way, when somebody was giving a speech at the funeral, and he started lobbing grenades and shooting into the crowd. At the funeral, yeah. And three people were murdered that day, and he became an icon in the Loyalist community. But we'll walk up to the Republican plot here and I'll show you that. This would be where a lot of the hunger strikers would have been buried and stuff. You'll see some famous names. And then what I was telling you before about the grenade being thrown here at the funeral, this was the funeral. It was of these three volunteers, Mairead Farrell, Dan McCann and Sean Savage. They were executed by the SAS, 1998, 6th of March in Gibraltar. So you were here the day the Michael Stone come up and started throwing the grenades at McCann, Savage and Farrell's funeral?
I was, yes, yeah.
So can you give us a wee rundown on what?
Well, it was a very busy funeral, you know, because of the way they were murdered over in Gibraltar, you know. But personally, I was standing just over in this line here, and Stone was just standing just roughly about here when we heard the shots, and a couple of fellas looked at each other and says there wasn't supposed to be a volley of shots because there was a volley of shots already fired in St James's Fort, you know, out of respects, and everybody was wondering what was going on. And then the next thing, pandemonium, a hand grenade went off, and then another hand grenade went off, and young people with children, and you know, and people say why were children there? It was such a beautiful day, And you should be able to go and attend your people's funerals without these kind of attacks. You know, I can never remember Republicans ever attacking a Protestant or a loyalist, you know, or anything like that. You know, I can never remember anything like that.
So just a wee question, see, I remember hearing, I was young at the time, it was before I'd moved to New York, but I remember hearing stories and they sort of stuck with me. I remember Larry Marley's funeral up north Belfast, and other funerals. It was constant, the RUC and the British Army were constantly beating the mourners, not letting I think Larry Marley's funeral, it took 3 days.
Yeah, I was at Larry Marley's. He's just buried over here, Larry Marley.
But it took 3 days to get
because he had the tricolour on the side, they wouldn't let him leave the house without the tricolour.
But I heard the day that Michael Stone attacked the funeral here, people were wondering why there wasn't such a heavy-handed British.
Well, the day that Michael Stone attacked the graveyard here, we came in, myself and I'll not mention the two other lads, but there was a white transit van sitting just over here on the motorway, but it was facing on the way down, against the traffic, and the helicopter was 100 yards above us. You couldn't even hear the speeches, you know, you couldn't hear what was going on. The drum of the helicopter was wailed, you know, but nobody expected anything but it happened, you know. But the day it happened, honestly, it was actually one of the worst days of my life, and I was at Larry Marley, God rest him's funeral, and helped, you know, to get him out of the house. You know.
So that's you on the left there?
Yeah, the good looking one.
Containing the 3 IRA members, Mairead Farrell, Daniel McCann and Sean Savage, came together a mile from Milltown Cemetery, outside a church where requiem masses had just been held for the 2 men. The procession, many thousand strong, made its way slowly and quietly towards the cemetery, snaking past Anderson's Town police station, but with not a single soldier or policeman in sight. The security services stayed away. Once inside, the cortege headed for the Republican plot. There, Irish tricolours were removed from the coffins and preparations were made to lower them into the graves. Unknown to the huge crowd of mourners, a man had infiltrated them, and as a coffin came to rest, he threw the first of his deadly grenades. Those around the graveside got down on the ground as instructed, others strained to see what was happening. Many of the crowd gave chase in hot pursuit of the man who stopped, turned and threw another grenade. Stunned by the sudden attack, some of the crowd ran in all directions, but others kept up pursuit as their quarry drew a handgun and fired at them.
Being fired in the cemetery.
As the gunman made the perimeter fence, Sinn Féin President Gerry Adams appealed for calm.
Can people please stay calm? Can people stay with the oil?
Still threatening his pursuers, the gunman ran along the motorway. He was eventually caught by the mob and attacked before being arrested by the police and taken to hospital. In the cemetery, mourners, frightened and shocked, took cover. There were many injuries, and some of those left hysterical had to be helped in undignified fashion. And the tension boiled over, as some of the crowd mistakenly thought they'd identified another infiltrator. To get the seriously injured away quickly, the funeral cars were used. Within minutes, though, ambulances were arriving and taking the hurt and shocked to the nearest hospital.
Take a look at this. That's the proclamation.